Welcome to Leadership Unlocked, where we uncover the pivotal stories that shape extraordinary leaders. I'm Dusty Holcomb, and on this show, we don't just talk about leadership, we decode it. In every episode, we sit down with the change makers who've walked through fire, challenged the status quo, and emerged with wisdom worth sharing. These aren't just lessons. They're lived experiences, real moments that reveal the mindset, the resilience, and the clarity behind lasting impact. Today, you'll hear one of those stories. What happens when a CEO with 35 years of global experience walks away from the boardroom to help other leaders win? You get Terry Dunn, founder of Intelligy, strategy architect, and trusted guide to CEOs who are done with fluff and ready for results. He's built teams in 30 plus countries, turned around companies, and he now coaches executives on how to lead with clarity and deliver under pressure. If you're leading a business and need to sharpen your strategy, this episode is for your playbook. Let's get into it. This is Leadership Unlocked. Terry, thank you so much for carving time out of your schedule. And I've been looking forward to this conversation because, gosh, we have known each other at 15 plus years now. And I have gleaned so much wisdom from you over the years that to have you on the show and give a broader audience access to some of that wisdom is such a gift. And I just appreciate you doing it. Thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I think the great thing, and you know this, is that every time you're working with somebody, you're learning as much as you're giving. So it's been great for me.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, if I were to say that I were completely selfless in doing this podcast, I would be lying, because I get to talk to really smart people and learn things from them and improve myself. And I figured if I was going to do that anyway, I might as well let others tune in and learn as well along the way. So this is going to be fun. Let me start with a kind of a founding question I love to ask all of our guests at the very beginning. And I have a feeling I know what it's going to be for you, but I could be completely wrong. What is a leadership belief or principle that you live by, and what's the story behind it? How did you get there?
People in leadership positions, that your role as a leader is to enable the success of others, and that everything you do is aimed at that. It's not aimed about what you can do. As a matter of fact, when I work with leadership teams for doing strategic planning or something, one of the things I tell them when I get the whole group together is, look, you have to remember you don't actually do anything. Right? You don't generate revenue. Your only job is to make everybody else successful. And I think that if you approach that as a leader, if you think about it in those terms, it changes your priorities as a leader. It changes your priorities of how you spend your time.
Well, having been on the recipient of that conversation a bunch of times in my life, and there's nothing I like being told more than by Terry Dunn. Remember, Dusty, you don't actually do anything.
That's right. You don't really contribute anything here.
Wait a minute. Now it's a little too close to home. All right. So were you born with that wisdom, or did you have to figure it out the hard way?
I think I figured everything out the hard way. I don't know why. I seem to prefer to take that route. I think it's a combination of things. I think that from a personality perspective, you and I have had these conversations about personal purpose. When I looked at, for the third stage of my career, what I wanted to do, I spent some time really thinking about personal purpose. And the personal purpose for me was around doing things for other people, enriching the lives of others. And so I think that, first of all, having that mindset, which has been with me my whole life, I can't remember when I didn't have that mindset. I think having that mindset and then combining it with the leadership roles and what you're there to do as a leader, I think it just blends, it just lends itself to that. So for me as a leader, that wasn't something I really thought about consciously. That's just how I was. That's just how I am.
That may be how you were or how you are today and how you showed up. When I'm thinking about this question, what I'm thinking about is, I'm laughing because you said you had to learn everything the hard way. What's a lesson you had to learn the hard way that really changed how you approach leadership or approach how you need to create influence and impact for others?
I learned so many lessons that way. It's difficult to pick something out. I think one of the most significant events, which for me was a life lesson, but then was crucial when I had the opportunity to become a leader, when I went into leadership roles. When I was a kid, into my teens, I had a bad temper. Now, my bad temper didn't show up by throwing things or yelling at people or anything like that. That wasn't my personality. But I would have great anger inside. It would just, I would feel this incredible anger. And particularly if I felt that people were unfairly dealing with me in some way. I grew up fairly poor, and I wasn't a big guy ever in my life. And so you get picked on or whatever. And I think that anger would be an emotion inside me. And I just remember one time I was in my teens. I was about probably 15 years old, and I got really angry at something. I was by myself. I know where I was standing. I can picture it. And this huge just wave of emotion, and tears came to my eyes. Not because I was afraid, not because I was sad, because of just the emotional anger that was in me. And I remember stopping myself and saying, look, this is absolutely stupid. You are losing control of the situation when you get like this. And this is just dumb. And I vowed to myself, I'm never going to let myself do that again. And that set the tone for me, going forward in pretty much everything I did, but particularly as a leader. The patience, the staying calm in the middle of the storm became kind of my hallmark. People remarked on it all the time. Matter of fact, my mother told me one time we were in a deep personal situation with my sister, and my mom said, I don't know how you can stay so calm all the time. And I told her, I said, Mom, if I thought that running around with my hair on fire would make the situation better, I would do that. But that hasn't been my experience. And that's just how I always approach things as a leader. And I think that because we have these, critical situations that occur in every organization, every group, every team that we lead. And I think that, people look to the leader to have that gravity, that sense of calm that is necessary. Because look, if the pilot of the plane is running around screaming, pretty much everybody's going to be upset. You want your pilot to be calm. And that's where it started for me. That was an absolute turning point for me in the way I dealt with things in life and in the way that I was as a leader, because there wasn't anything that could rattle me after that.
The whole purpose of this is one of the things I didn't want to do is just have a bunch of great leaders on and talk about, tell me a leadership lesson that you learned. But these moments, these things that we learn in our life influence how we lead. They influence and impact, how we help and serve others. I'm writing down a note here that the pilot must be calm. And I've never thought about leadership through this metaphor, like you are the pilot, right? And I've worked with leaders and seen leaders who volatile would be an insufficient word to explain their emotional range. And I've worked with some who are very, very calm. So this became a hallmark for you. What are the impacts of that? Like it is when you talk about, you want your pilot to be calm, but what are the other benefits that come for the people that you're leading, the people that you're serving, because they see that you can't be rattled, that you're not going to be emotionally unhinged because things are going a way that's unexpected, or, the world's crazy. Who knows what's going to happen next?
I think you being calm as a leader brings a sense of calm in difficult situations to your whole team, your whole organization. And I think what it does is it builds confidence and trust. And, I had the privilege of hearing Colin Powell speak once. And he was such an impressive person. And he talked about the most important thing about leadership was trust. Obviously, nobody's going to follow somebody they don't trust. I think a big element of that trust is people having confidence in their leader. And I think, a leader's running around screaming, yelling, pointing fingers, doing things like that. That doesn't exactly build a lot of confidence. And therefore, I think it's difficult to have trust. Probably like you, I've had some leaders who are really good leaders, and I've had some leaders that I would not put in the really good category. What's interesting is, I told the story, it's like when I was 15 years old. So as I progressed in my career, I was a night shift supervisor at Caterpillar back in Gillette Manufacturing. And I had a superintendent whose name was, you don't forget these people, his name was Al Sondergaard. And he had white hair, and he was famous for yelling and screaming at people. And I remember he came in at the beginning. I was on second shift. He came in at the beginning of the shift and wanted to know why we hadn't gotten some particular parts out the night before that were critical parts in this area that I was responsible for. And he just started yelling and screaming. His face was all red. He was literally just sort of jumping up and down. And I just stood there, because I do stay calm. So I just stood there until he got finished and finally kind of, ran himself out a little bit. And I just said, well, Al, we never got the parts to build those particular valves. Manufacturing had problems. They couldn't get us the valves. So we didn't have any of the parts. And he stood there for a moment. And he just said to me, he said, son, anybody could build them if they had the parts. And he turned around and walked away.
So what'd you take from that?
So, well, I did learn anybody could build them if they had the parts. I wasn't important in that perspective. But I think that there's a classic case of somebody emotionally reacting. Didn't even ask me a question when he came up. He just came up and started going off. And I think that if I hadn't stayed calm through that could have ended like really ugly. I think that ability to do that just translates to your team when they see that. I never yelled at anybody in all the years that I've been a leader of whatever. I've never yelled at anybody for anything. I don't raise my voice. I don't pound on the table. I don't. And yet nobody was ever questioned whether I was in charge or not. There's a calm confidence on my part that creates a calm confidence on the part of the team. And I'll tell you, because all teams go through difficult times. And so it makes it much easier for them to go through those times when they feel they have a leader that will listen, will ask questions, isn't going to yell and scream. By the way, if you want people to tell you what's really going on, you really can't be somebody who likes to yell and scream, right?
And you talk about trust and confidence, and I'm in full agreement about the importance of trust. If they have confidence, they know how you're going to react. If they trust that when they bring you information that's suboptimal or bad or whatever it is, because they know how you're going to react. If you're volatile, they're going to be doing a temperature check and a pulse check before they walk in the room, and you may or may not find the information that you need, which is only going to hurt the organization. It's only going to hurt the capabilities that you're trying, to perform.
Jim Collins talks about it beautifully when he talks about confronting the brutal facts. And nobody's going to want to confront the brutal facts if they have a leader who doesn't have that calm confidence. Right? Nobody's going to want to talk about the hard things if they're concerned that it's going to blow up in their face. And so they actually conspire to keep things from coming to the surface, as opposed to bringing things to the surface so that we can get better and improve and all those things.
Well, I'm thinking about it as you talk, and you and I both share the same affinity for Jim Collins' work. I think about the confidence of the leader to be open to receiving a bad message, to be open to receiving a brutal truth, the brutal facts. They have to be confident in who they are and how they are going to show up as they lead themselves. Because if they're not confident, I'm thinking of a conversation I was having with someone a few weeks ago, and it was working with a leader in his team, and his team is saying, well, he doesn't ever actually tell us we never know where we stand. And I was having this conversation with him, and he goes, well, if they know everything I know, then, I don't have any ability to create control. And I remember I was kind of going, okay, well, we need to peel the onion here a little bit and figure out what's really going on. But if you're showing up confident that you don't have to be the person that's right or in charge. You have influence, you have impact. Your team's going to respond so much better, so much more effectively to that.
That's a hallmark of really good leaders. I had a vice president working for me one time who came in and sat down in my office and complained that people weren't treating him like a vice president. And so someone who had been in me said, at some point he finally said, "You've got to listen to me. I'm a vice president." And I said, I have never been in a meeting where I mentioned whatever my title was. It's just not an issue. And people say, "Well, look, when you walk in the room, we already know who's in charge. Like, you don't have to say it, or you don't have to sit at the end of the table, or you don't have to, control the conversation," because I never did. I tried to engender conversation, and again, calm confidence. I never had to prove anything to anybody because it just is. This just is what it is.
What are some of the tools or techniques that you've developed over the years that have helped you become a more impactful, more influential leader of others? Things that they took time to percolate. Your approaches or philosophies. Like, none of us are born like with all the knowledge or all the born leader. Like, you've been learning for the duration of your career, and I know you're still learning and still investing and sharpening your saw. What are a couple tools or techniques that you think are fundamentally important in order to create the impact and influence you want? And how did you develop them? How did you come about those approaches?
I usually say that, one of the things that I did best as a CEO in some different businesses was to be able to successfully grow and scale a business. I mean, that's kind of why I was hired and brought in companies that were either at a plateau and couldn't get beyond it, or I went in and did a turnaround. And so when I look back and think about, why was I successful doing that? First of all, I wasn't successful. Lots of other people did all the work. And I was blessed to get to work with a lot of great people. Yeah,
because we've established at this point, you don't actually do anything. Like,
I really don't do anything. And even the things that I try to do are, I'm probably marginal at. But probably 4 things that I think are just super important. And I think in working with businesses and leaders today, I think we have a tendency to focus on growing and we forget about scaling businesses. I think it's one of the biggest weaknesses that I see in organizations. And because we're all about the growth, we're about the, grow the sales, add products, whatever it is, we forget about scaling the business so we can actually be successful as we grow. And then we get to the point where we fall over or we retrench. And I've seen companies that have lots of growth opportunity and they grow a little bit and then they fall back, and they grow a little bit and they fall back because they never scale the business to be successful at a higher level. Mm-hmm. And so when I look back and I think about that, I think there were just like 4 things that were really important. I think having a vision for the business. Back in the days I worked for Caterpillar, I was given an assignment to automate a particular piece. It was called a cap. It was part of the hydraulic cylinder. I was at the Joliet facility. We made one of our big products was hydraulic cylinders. And so I was given the job I was in manufacturing engineering, and to go out and automate making this one piece. We were really getting into automation. So I went off and I was supposed to come back with a plan of how we could automate it. Probably not surprising to you, I didn't think that was a very good project. And I didn't think it was a very good project. I went up and sat down with the senior design engineer for hydraulic cylinders and talked to him about it. And he agreed. He said, yeah, really, Mike, if you drove, I looked at the numbers, if I'd driven the cost of that part to 0, it really wouldn't have made a dent. Like, it wouldn't have moved the needle on anything. Mm-hmm. But if we could automate the manufacture of the entire cylinder, now we're talking some real money. And so in working with him, I had a friend over in accounting who ran numbers and stuff for me. And actually, I had a little home computer. And so this engineer came over to my house on a Saturday, and I took a bunch of data home, wrote a program. We came out with a new cylinder design that would be easier to automate, because what we had, there was just too much variability. We were able to reduce the variability dramatically and make it possible. So I put all this stuff together, got a meeting with all the muckety-mucks at the plant to present my idea for automating this one part, and told them that, if we do the whole cylinder and here was a design concept, it was a $20 million annual savings.
Holy smokes.
Now, this is in the 1980s. 20 million was real money even at Caterpillar back in the 1980s, and affected all of these different vehicles. Some vehicles like motor graders was huge savings. That willingness to step outside the box and challenge our thinking led me to a guy I worked for named Rod Bissell, who became the executive vice president in charge of the entire construction and mining division at Caterpillar. Enormous, like very powerful job. But back in that day, Rod wasn't that big. But I was working for him, and he came to me one day and he said, I'm trying to figure out how to get more Terry Dunns, which shocked me, by the way. I usually figured I was on the verge of getting fired because of all these things. And Rod said, the problem is I can give him the same training, I can give him the same experience, but I can't get the same kind of thinking out of him. And he said, what's different? And so I thought about that. And the next day I went back to Rod and I said, Rod, I don't know. I think it's about vision. I think it's about never letting what we currently do limit what we could do.
Without vision, where are you going? Like what is it you're trying to achieve? How do you break free from what the past? Like, where there is no vision, the people will perish.
Well, yeah, without vision, you're not a leader, you're a manager. People can't follow somebody who's not going anywhere. Right? And it's incredible. So many leaders, when I talk to them about this, they go, oh, we have a vision. I got a vision. I know exactly what it is. I think everybody knows. And yet people don't know. It's in their head. My rules, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. And I make that for everything. If this isn't written down, it doesn't exist. And the vision is so impactful to an organization because not only does it give people something to strive for, a direction that they're going, but think about if you're on a leadership team, and I know you've probably experienced this. If the vision isn't clear, then every leader on that team who's running different things, whether it's a division or department or whatever, all they have is their own stuff. And so when they're making decisions throughout the year, they look at it and they go, well, here's the best thing for IT, or here's the best thing for manufacturing, or here's the best thing for engineering, here's the best thing for customer service. And they do those things because they have no unifying vision. And therefore, they're sometimes at odds. We're not really going in a direction. And it creates strife, and it creates, like, people can't connect to each other's decisions because it's not unified.
But when there is no vision in the situation you just described, you're going to have waste. You're going to have wasted energy, and because people are going to be doing their own thing. There's just waste in the system.
Yeah, and it's even worse. It's friction.
Yes, better said.
It creates incredible friction inside an organization because we're all trying to do different things. Not because we're trying to be difficult or trying to go different directions. It's because we don't have a unified direction. I have no concept, nothing to really measure by, no filter with which to pass these opportunities in my department through. And so I do the best I can.
Yeah, and to your point, it's not intentional. It's not with malice. It's do the best I can because they're not being led. All right, so number one, vision.
Vision. I'll try to do these faster. Number two is, culture is, I'm a huge advocate of culture. I know you are too, from the years that we've worked together. It's just absolutely critical. And I think if there's something I did do well, I'm good at vision. I think I was good at building culture. I'm good at connecting with people at all levels of an organization because I've been at all levels of the organization. I empathize at all levels. And culture is just really important, from purpose and core values to, all the way down to the specifics of things in our organization.
Well, I think this is actually a really good one to double click on a little bit, because culture, it's easy to talk about, but what does it mean? So I'd love to hear, what is your definition of culture of an organization, a good culture or a suboptimal or a bad culture? But when you say good at building culture, what does culture mean?
Well, first of all, there is no such thing as bad culture. Culture isn't good or bad or right or wrong. Your core values aren't good or bad or right or wrong. It's just consistent and inconsistent. I say there's no such thing as bad culture. I guess bad culture would be when you say one thing and do another, act another way. But that's not bad. That's just conflict. It's one of my personal core values that I just don't like to work with people who don't have integrity. But that doesn't mean that somebody for whom that's not important is wrong and I'm right.
That's an important distinction. Have you ever had or been part of an organization where there was core value misalignment for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And because core values change when ownership changes or when leadership changes. And so you can be, really well aligned with an organization, have a leadership change, and the core values may change, and now you're not in alignment. So one of the companies that I ran down in the Charlotte area, a manufacturing company, when I got there, I didn't align with the owner's core values, but my job was to come in and grow and build that company, and I got to build my own culture, right? The owner stepped aside, and I got to build my own culture, so that was okay. When we sold that business, there were some core values of the new owners, it was a Swiss-based company, that really led me to leave that company. I stayed for my 3 years, but there were some things that impugned my integrity in my perspective that I wasn't comfortable with. And so it wasn't that I was right and they were wrong. It was that I no longer aligned properly with them. And so I decided to take advantage of another opportunity. But that's what happens. If we say one thing, but that's like, I tell people when I'm working with them, you've got to be honest. When you put up your core values, which is the heart of your culture, along with your purpose and your mission, some other things, when you put those down, you have to be honest about them. Our owner at the time at that one company said, we're all about customer service. And we went out and hired a customer service manager who was a great customer service manager. He believed in really being tops in customer service. And I remember he'd been there, his name was Eddie, and he'd been there, he's a great guy, been there a couple of months. And he got called to the owner's office. I was the VP of Ops at the time. He got called to the owner's office, and the owner said, Eddie, the costs for our warranty are really high this month. Our owner was very sensitive to dollars and cents on everything. He said, the cost is just really high. And Eddie said, well, we had some issues. We just had to fix some things in the field, blah, blah, blah. And the owner said, okay. This went on about 3 months in a row. And after about 3 months, the owner said, Eddie, look, these warranty costs are just too high. And Eddie said, well, these things were our fault. And the owner said, yes, but if you do it right, you can get them to pay for it anyway. One of our core values was customer service. The problem wasn't that the owner was wrong. Mm-hmm. The problem was he said one thing, but that's not really what he believed. Mm. Right? So if you don't believe in that, then say, heck with the customer, just maximize the profit. Or if you're going to put them up on the wall, maybe you don't want to say heck with the customer. It doesn't look good. So just put maximize profit. But don't say it's all about the customer and then not act that way. Because that's when you have, if you want to call it bad culture, you have conflict. So you have people who sign up for one culture, and then when they get there, it's not that. And now you have unhappy, confused employees. And you have an organization that, again, we just introduce friction into that organization because of it.
I like the way you framed this a minute ago with consistent or inconsistent and thinking about it from a leadership perspective. What advice would you give people? I'm going to start my answer, and then I'm curious of your thoughts. Like, you're going back to something you said a minute ago, which is if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. Yeah. What advice would you give people as they are navigating a cultural alignment for themselves? If something changes in the organization, changes in leadership, what advice would you give for listeners as they are thinking about cultural and core value alignment for themselves and an organization?
Yeah, that comes up all the time in working with companies because I have a lot of passion, as you can tell, around culture. And I think it's so critical to every organization's success. And not just financial success, but success in engaging their employees, success in enabling that success, like we were talking about earlier. It's a big part of it. So what I tell them is, first of all, if you're not committed to this, don't do it. That leadership, it's all about leadership commitment. You can make posters and put it up on the walls, and you can print up cards and hand them out to people, and you can tell people this stuff. But first of all, the leadership has to live those core values. It's challenge yourself as to how you show up. Secondly, it's all about talking about it on an ongoing basis. I tell leaders all the time, we always want to get out and talk to people throughout our organization. We know we need to do that. We know we need to make ourselves available to them, but we never know what to talk about. I mean, we go out and talk about the bowling league last week. I don't know. This is the perfect topic. We talk about our core values and what it means, how we see those being implemented. We ask them questions about it. I tell people when they like to do their huddles, their team meetings, or their once a week, 15-minute stand-ups, whatever, this is a great topic. So what does integrity mean in our department?
Mm-hmm.
How do we know? What kind of examples do we have? How does that show up? How do we show up, for that particular core value? And to do that consistently on and on. It's not something where you can post it and walk away and say, well, that's done. It's continuous.
It's continuous. It's evergreen. I may have gotten this from you through our conversations over the years, but one of the things that I know I've aligned on or really oriented to is that when I show up, people know I'm always going to talk about three things. And one of them is always going to be our core values. It's always going to be the behavioral manifestation of the values that represent the words on the wall. It's not going to be the words on the wall, because frankly, words on the wall are inconsequential. They just are what's written. It's actually how we behave that says the meaning, that conveys the culture. And, I know that, and I've heard this for years about myself, but it's always when here comes Dusty, he's going to talk about culture. He's going to talk about core values very, very specifically in every conversation.
Yeah. And it's so important to drive that down to the behaviors. What does that look like? Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Because sometimes it's hard for people to relate to just those words that are up on the wall. And so we've got to help them internalize it. That's when you know that it's really taking root. And I think if you walk through an organization that really does a good job of that, you talk to the people, it's absolutely amazing the engagement that they have with that organization, because they feel like it's theirs. It is their culture. You will attract people naturally and you will repel people naturally. You'll attract those that fit, you'll repel people that don't. And as I tell people, you have to really, it's not easy sometimes, but you have to be really the guardian for that culture then to say, I cannot allow people who refuse to fit to the culture to be in the organization. No matter how good a performer they are, it's nothing personal. It's the fact that this is who we are and this is how we have to act.
And going back to kind of my question, which is and what do people need to do? They have your own core values written down, understand and codify what it is that you believe and what's important. And I know personally, most people I've talked to don't actually have that. They just become part of an organization. They have them, they just don't have them written down.
Yeah, and there isn't a tangible commitment to them with a lot of companies. I mean, I think the leaders often underestimate the level of effort that it takes to make those things live and breathe on a daily basis. And the other thing they underestimate always is I've always said that leaders cast a big shadow, and the higher up you are in the leadership hierarchy, the bigger the shadow is that you cast. And I think we typically underestimate how big that shadow is, how big our influence is.
Completely agree with you. The weight of the words can be very heavy. And if you aren't paying attention to them, they can quickly carry a weight of their own. Let me ask you something. Are you leading off of instinct? I mean, you've got the vision, you've built the thing, but most leaders I talk to are still flying without a system. Vision to Victory, the mastermind, changes that. It's a 12-week experience where we install the leadership operating system you've always needed: purpose, strategy, cadence, metrics, execution. This isn't a course. It's not more content. It's a small group of leaders who are done chasing clarity and ready to lead with it. You'll walk out with a full leadership operating system, a trusted circle of peers, and a repeatable way to scale without losing yourself along the way. There are only 12 seats in this group, and most are already spoken for. It's an application-only process. Go to arcusgroup.com/mastermind to apply. All right, that's number 2. We have vision, we have culture. What else have you learned along the way?
Yeah, I think the next thing, and I think so many leaders that I talk to are challenged with this, and I think it was absolutely crucial for me, is being effective at delegating responsibility and authority. We don't realize how bad we are at it a lot of times. We think we're good at it, but really what we're doing most of the time is directing. We tell people to do stuff all the time. I'm constantly delegating things. No, you're just directing. You're telling people to do something, and usually we tell them what to do and how to do it, The problem is, if we want to scale a business, our organization has to really be good at effective delegation of authority and responsibility. And I learned to do that. I realized that I could quickly become the bottleneck to my organization. The company I was running was in a Gaston County in North Carolina. It was built on mills, on the textile mill industry. And so it's a very paternalistic way of managing organizations. And you can't be paternalistic and scale a company effectively, right? Because your job is to, I like to say, unleash the potential of every employee. That's when you know you're really being successful. Every employee. And I think sometimes we think it's just us or a small group. Like it's just the leadership team or it's just management people. It's not. I worked with, not highly educated, high school educated people out on hourly jobs that we were able to unleash the potential. And when you can do that, it's amazing what an organization can accomplish. And the start of that is being willing and being good at delegating authority and responsibility.
What gets in the way? What prevents leaders from being good at delegating authority and responsibility?
It's several things. First of all, we don't know how to do it. I mean, nobody teaches us that. As you know, as I said, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. So I did it for a long time, and I talked to leaders about it for a long time, and people would look at me and go, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then they didn't do it. And so I created actually a model, a graphic that helps people do that because you have to write it down. You have to sit down and actually write down, here are the key responsibilities. Here are the key decisions that people have to make in this role. And here's how I want them to deal with that. And I want them either to just handle it. They have complete autonomy. I don't need to know about it. I don't want to know about it. I want them to, they have complete authority and responsibility, but I want to know what's going on because maybe it'll affect another division, department, whatever. So keep me informed. And then the third one is check with me. And that's where I retain final control. They have limited responsibility and authority. I want them to come with the solution, what they think they need to do, but I want final say-so over it before it happens, right? Now, most people, if they sit down and they start creating something like that, they quickly realize there's a whole bunch of stuff in check with me. There's not much in keep me informed, and that's not because there isn't a lot of things they want to know about. It's because we forget to tell people that. We just assume they know that. So here's what happens when we don't do a good job of this. Either we wind up in one of two states, usually as leaders, and we go back and forth between them. We either micromanage or we abdicate, right? We either throw it over the wall and just assume everybody knows what we want, or we get into telling everybody what we want all the time. And that's what it looks like from whoever we're leading's perspective, the follower's perspective, right? They're either getting micromanaged or they're abdicating. I do something and I tell my boss, oh yeah, here's what we did. And they go, what? I can't believe you did that, didn't ask me first. Okay, I thought I could do that. And so then the next time something happens, I go and ask them and they go, look, you've got to be able to make these decisions on your own. This is what I paid you for. I mean, somebody in your position. And so, it's very confusing to people. And we create this paralysis in people, this uncertainty. Again, I'm going to use the word friction that we create in the organization, where people aren't sure, should I go forward, should I not go forward? Now, for people like myself, that was never an issue because I didn't worry about asking. But that was just me. That's why I figured I was probably on the verge of getting fired a lot, even though I never did get fired, I should say. But for most people, that's not the case. And so we create difficulties for them by not having these clear boundaries. And so we create these boundaries by categorizing these things.
Well, the creation of clarity is so important. I just this week was having a conversation with someone, and they shared that their boss had told them that they delegate too much. And his question to me was like, I've never been told that before. I've always, if anything, I've been told that I micromanage, but I was being told that I delegated too much. He says, how do I handle this? And I said, well, the first thing, that I can suggest is understand what that means. Like, what are the behaviors you're demonstrating this person? Because that was all the feedback you got. You're delegating too much and it's not meeting my expectations. don't delegate as much. And he didn't know what to do with that. He's like, what do I do? Ask the question, create clarity. And if you're not getting it, demand it. Like, you've got to get to the clarity. And if the leader's not, if that's the label they're giving you, if your manager is saying, you've got to say, help me understand, go 5 whys, whatever tool you need, help me understand what it is you're saying so I can specifically address. Otherwise, I'm guessing. If I guess wrong, you're still frustrated, and we're going to be in this doom loop again and again and again.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to write it down, because that's when clarity really comes. It's clarity for both sides,
Yes.
right? So when we're doing this, we do what we call the delegation model, which I created just to capture this thing. And so we look at these 3 circles: the check with me, the keep me informed, and the just handle it. And we write down these primary responsibilities, decisions, these things that come up. And then we sit down with a person and we kind of negotiate those, because we go, what can be missing? What are some other things? And let's see where they should go. And maybe they might say, well, I think I can handle this. Listen, or might say, I'm not comfortable with that yet. Why don't you, I'd like to continue to come to you on that for a while. And then this is a living document, if you will, but it's a living model that we revisit over time and change it, because it'll be different for different people, even if they're in the same kind of position, because of their skills, their experience, and all that kind of stuff, or situations that are going on. When we have it written down, we can go back and say, look, normally I just want you to handle that, but for this period of time, I'd like for you to come to me because there's some things going on here. And now we've got total clarity and expectation on both sides.
Well, and you have trust because you've negotiated, you've had the conversation.
Absolutely.
And I think that the negotiation is so important, because you're creating the dialogue so that when the situation changes and you do need to have that conversation, it's an open dialogue. Hey, Terry, this is going on right now. Normally you would be fully, this is, you handle it. I don't want to know about it. This is going on. This involves our number 1 client. I want you to check with me. But you're in that conversation, and it's a dialogue.
That's right.
Not a changing and shifting expectation. And you're getting you're bouncing between 2 lanes, like you're in between guardrails. And there's nothing more frustrating for someone than to be constantly guessing, where am I? What, I'm bouncing back and forth. What's important? What's not? It creates so much friction, and it creates so much waste in an organization, because time is precious. Time is finite. Let's make it count.
And the other thing it does, and I think this is just so important, is it creates the boundaries within which people can work. But people have to have some autonomy. I mean, nobody wants to just sit around and do tasks.
No, they don't.
And so you've got to have some autonomy, or it's really not a job worth doing, because that'd be really totally boring. To give them that, we have to create some boundaries. By the way, you can take this same model and use it with your teenage kids, but by giving them those boundaries, it tells them where they have that autonomy. So it might be, look, up to this amount of money, just make the decision. If it gets up to this amount of money, I need you to check with me, because I want to make sure it's not going to impact anything. Or I want to be kept informed. Down here, I don't even need to know about it. In the middle, I want to be kept informed about it. Above this amount, you need to get permission. I tell people all the time, like personnel issues, there may be some level of personnel where they can just handle it. There's some level that I want to be kept informed about. And then there's some level that, if you're going to take an action, I need to be involved in that. I want to personally have the say-so on that. So I think that's all this model does. Now, the question you asked me was, why do leaders have a hard time with it? The first thing is we don't really know how to do it. So having something like a model sort of leads us through the process and gets us to a point where we can do that. The second piece is because as an organization, we generally suck at accountability. So I've been, for the last 15 or whatever years, I've been working with different organizations, and I've surveyed hundreds of leaders in all kinds of organizations and companies. And over 90% list accountability as one of their primary weaknesses in the organization. The fear, if we delegate, is if we don't have good accountability, right? We're just not comfortable with doing it. And so it's much easier to retain control. Just make that check with me circle really, really big, And then I can make sure nothing gets out of hand. So the fourth thing is accountability. It's creating a process of accountability in your organization, which is very different than we typically think about accountability, but it becomes part of our culture. I think the hardest thing when I do sessions about this with clients, we talk about accountability, and I ask people, well, what do you think of? When I say the word accountability, what do you think of? What pops into your head? What do you think of?
Well, I'm privy to having some insights here about how you think about it. When I've asked this question of others, people think of being held accountable. They think of getting in trouble if they don't do something. They think of the negative consequence downstream. I have some different thoughts on accountability that, frankly, probably have been informed by some of our conversations over the years. But what is it that you hear when you talk to clients?
Oh, well, the first thing, and frankly, myself, when I was younger, if you'd said you're going to be held accountable,
yes,
what is that? What picture comes into your mind, right? What's the image? I always had an image of there's a guy in a headlock with a grinder that they're getting ready to put him up against. It's a job threat.
Right.
People are going to be held accountable. People need to be held accountable around here. I think when I went in and did the turnaround, one of the things the VP of sales said to me was, you need to fire some people down in the engineering group because they need to be held accountable. Nobody's been fired down there in quite a while. I mean, that's just the connotation of the word. Mm-hmm. And yet there's nothing about it that means that. Mm-hmm. Right? It's taking ownership. It's taking responsibility. It doesn't mean that there's punishment, but it's always around punishment is how we think about accountability. And because we're not good at it, that's how it usually winds up. Because we don't have an ongoing process in place, then typically what happens as a leader is that we get so frustrated that it comes out in anger, in threats, and in firing somebody.
Yep.
And that becomes our accountability process.
Well, you said the key there, and I'm going to interrupt, but it's this ongoing process of accountability, which means it's a dialogue about the expectations, what we agreed would or would not happen. And now we're going to have a conversation when it does or doesn't happen, not letting it compound and compound and compound because we didn't actually, if the leader's not following up, they're not accountable for what it was they said they were going to follow up on. They're not responsible. They're not consistent.
I think it's fascinating that we think that if we're better at accountability, our organizations will improve, but our vision of accountability is punishment after the fact. Mm. So here's the thing. Something has to fail, someone or something, before there's accountability. How can that make our organizations better, right? I mean, it just isn't. It's too late. And so accountability isn't about punishment after the fact when something didn't go right. Accountability is about our process to enable more success.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you say it that way, and I've got some theories and thoughts on this too, but accountability is about our commitment to what we've said we're going to do.
It's about making and meeting commitments. And it's funny, I'll talk to leaders and say, what do you think it would look like, feel like in your organization if every single person made and then 100% met their commitments? Mm. And people get glazed over because they say, think about how much time, energy, resource, and money we spend making up for the fact that somebody didn't make and meet their commitment. It's a huge amount of what we do every day. It's the crisis management that we're in most of the time.
100%. It's interesting. I've been working and thinking about, there's accountability through two lenses. One is accountability of self. When you have people that are self-accountable, they're going to hold themselves accountable to the commitments they've made. You're not having to follow up because they do it. They have ownership. They do it themselves. And, that's kind of this utopian place where if you have an organization where 100% of the people are 100% committed to accountability of self, holding themselves accountable, you don't have to quote unquote manage them. You have to be careful, obviously, because then you run the risk of abdication. But if you don't have people aren't following through on their commitments, then you as a leader can't abdicate the follow-up. You can't abdicate the commitment to engaging with them to create managerial follow-through. That is also accountability. And if you're not doing that, then you're going to have organizations that aren't accountable because people go, and you taught me this. And it's one of my favorite lenses. Is it an expectation or is it a suggestion? That's it's one of my favorite phrases.
Yeah.
If you're not going to create a system, a written system of accountability, of follow through, whatever it is, it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, I love to say also, I'll oftentimes use, mandatory or optional.
Yes.
Like, is this optional or is it mandatory? And people say, oh, this is mandatory. So, oh, then we're 100%. Oh, well, no. Well, then it's optional. But you're absolutely right. The challenge is this, I think, for us as leaders. Again, if we go back to where we started talking, which was our job is to enable the success of others. Mm-hmm. That's really our job, right? And so when it comes to accountability, this is really about how do we help people make and meet commitments.
Underscore on how do we help people make and meet commitments?
Yeah. And then the other piece to that is, you were talking about this as self-accountability. Like, I'm a believer that nobody can create accountability in someone else. Mm. The only accountability is being self-accountable. Now, the manager's responsibility to do the paperwork afterwards. Just like in my opinion, I've never fired anybody in my life, but I've done a lot of paperwork. Right? I wasn't in control of the decisions they were. Mm. All I could do was create an environment for them to be successful. It's the same thing here. So if we talk about this, I'll tell you what I think people have to hold themselves accountable to. Mm. And some people will probably not agree with this because it's not just about the results. We start a conversation, there's something, I need something from you. And I say, Dusty, I need this. Can you have this report to me by the end of the day next Tuesday? Mm-hmm. And you say, sure, you can do that. Well, I can then say, great, I'll walk away. I'm more likely, by the way, to stop by your desk and say, hey, Dusty, I need this report by next Tuesday, and walk away. I don't even ask. I kind of tell you, right, I sign it and move on, which just only means that you're not accountable for anything because you didn't commit to anything. Mm. So I need to get you to make a commitment. And so I say, look, I need this by next Tuesday. And I have to ask the question, is that reasonable for you? I mean, I don't know what else is on your plate. I don't even know what I asked you to do yesterday, right? So, and I don't know what other people ask you to do, or what other challenges you have. So I have to ask you, this is part of the negotiation we have so that you have to make a commitment to this. And you say, yes, I can do it by next Tuesday. And I say, great, that's exactly what I need. Now I have to set the proper expectation. First of all, what do I mean by I need it by next Tuesday? I need it next Tuesday by 4:00. When you work on my team, by the way, my expectation is that when it's due, you bring it to me. I don't come and ask you for it. Mm-hmm. I'm also not going to check between now and Tuesday to see how you're doing on it. I'm not making myself responsible for you to get it done by next Tuesday. It doesn't mean I don't write it down on my calendar, but it does mean I'm not going to be following up. Now, here's the really important part of the process to me. I say to you, here's the process, Dusty. If sometime between now and next Tuesday, anything happens, because we know stuff does happen, anything happens that is going to jeopardize you having that done when you promised it, then think about what you need to overcome that and come and see me and let me know what that is. My job is to get that for you. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm going to do because I want you to be successful. So as soon as you find out something, it's time for you, we use the term raise the flag, mm-hmm. Gives a nice visual. I need you to raise the flag and tell me what you need to help you overcome it. And it's my job to get that for you. If I can't get that, then, we may have to reset the expectation. My whole goal here is for you to be successful, meeting your commitment. That's my whole goal. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to enable your success. Hopefully by Tuesday you show up and you bring it and all that, and we've got all the stuff. If it doesn't happen, let's say Tuesday comes and goes and the report doesn't show up, and on Wednesday morning I give you a call and say, Dusty, I need to talk to you. I'm not going to say, Dusty, what happened? Why didn't you get the report done? Because if I ask you that, you'll give me 34 reasons why you couldn't get it done, things that happened.
Yep.
And they may all be legitimate. I don't know. I'm going to say, Dusty, here's the process. At the first sign something's not going to happen, I need you to raise the flag and come to me. Well, we still have time, and let me see if I can help you so we can overcome that and still be successful. Mm-hmm. Now, if I ask you, why didn't you raise the flag? There are no 34 reasons. Like, unless you were in a car accident or something, there's no valid reason that you couldn't have come and told me. So that's how the process works. By about the third time, if you still haven't raised the flag, it's a different conversation. I've got to say, Dusty, I just want you to understand, this is how we work here. I can't have people on my team who can't work this process. It just doesn't work for us. It has nothing to do with you being good, bad, or indifferent. This is how we work here. And I have had to have that conversation with people. Now, what's so important about this that I really want to get across to people is what we're doing is we're teaching people to be self-accountable.
Correct. 100% agreement.
This process is really important. First of all, we're teaching that we're here to help. We're going to help them be successful. And I will tell you from my own experience, when I've helped people, I've gotten them resources, especially ones I didn't think I could get or are going to be too difficult. They bend over backwards to meet that commitment. Even though they know that even after I got them help, if something else happens, I'll help them again.
There's a big difference between helping someone when they've raised the flag and they've asked for help. They've said, here's the obstacle. Here's how I think I can overcome it. Here's the help that I need. And you're assisting them, than swooping in and doing it for them, or coming in and saying, all right, well, here's the 19 things you should have done in order to do this. And here's what you need to go do. And now I've gone from asking and getting your commitment to do something to just telling you how to get it done and doing it for you in essence.
Yeah.
Huge difference.
Yeah, worse, we just take it ourselves lots of times.
Yes.
We just take it on. And look, it's a natural tendency because as most leaders, we were great doers. We were the best doers. That's how we got to be leaders at some point. That's when opportunities arose. Somebody noticed us. And we were really great doers. So it's easy for us to just take it on ourselves. We'll just take care of that. Worst thing in the world for us to do, of course. Now, there are times, I will say there are times that we have to step in and do. Yes, there are. But those should be rare.
And they should be intentional and not a reaction to the thing not getting done, because that's a different issue than...
That's different.
It's a very different issue.
That's why the process is so important. You have to come to me with the solution that you need.
Yes. That is the key there.
That's the key. And look, some people will come and they come in and say, I need, 37 monkeys with typewriters. And so you have to ask questions and you go, okay, well, what are the typewriters for? Start to break that down and help them work through it. Because what you're doing, you're enabling success in this particular instance, but you're training them to think. You're training them critical thinking skills. You're training them to overcome hurdles on their own. You're training them to take the responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all about developing your team as well as being more successful along the way. And if you have someone who can never seem to come up with a reasonable idea, because they're not going to come in and say, here, well, I don't know, this happened and you're going to fix it. That's not how this is going to work. If somebody can't, then maybe they're in the wrong position.
Might be in the wrong seat.
In my case, if it's a member of my leadership, they can't work for me. I mean, they just can't. This is how we work. Now, I'll work with them. I'll give them ideas. We'll challenge. We'll get them training. We'll do all these things. It's not like we're just going to toss somebody out. But you've got to be committed to this process to be successful on my team. And I think that's an important part of scaling. Now, the main thing is when they get through this, it's not your success, it's their success, right? They've met the commitment. They feel good about that. It builds that desire to meet commitments builds. The other thing they're doing is they're learning to manage their own workloads. They're learning to understand and to project and to make good decisions about priorities. I mean, think about what you're really developing in people when you use this process. And it's amazing. And it's amazing how much more successful you can be.
It's amazing how it cascades through the organization and then they're doing the same thing with their team members. And suddenly you get to that utopian point that we were talking about a little while ago, which is what if everybody was 100% accountable to their commitments?
I often give the example, we used what we call process-focused work teams in manufacturing at one company. And over a year, it took a year, frankly, but we had 57 welders who were on a team. They became my very best team. We wound up putting them in charge of hiring their own members. Now, most people would say, how could you possibly do that? They suggested it because they were disappointed in the quality of people that were getting hired to come in as welders, because the people who were doing the hiring were hiring off their applications or resumes and saying, I got 5 years welding experience. So they came in and said, look, with just a little bit of money, we'd like to design and build a test piece that we'd like to test people on to come in, and we want to interview them. We had to give them a little training and interviewing so they didn't do anything they're not supposed to do. But we let them do the testing and pick who they wanted on their team. Can you think of the ramifications of that? So first of all, out of 10 applicants, we previously hired 8. If they had the welding experience and stuff, they only hired 2.
But I bet they were good.
But those 2 were always successful. First of all, because they did things that we didn't do in the previous process. And secondly, because they were committed to making them successful on the team. And so they trained them, they taught them, they oversaw them, they helped them. As peers, we didn't tell them to do it, they just did it. But they took that responsibility. This is all part of empowering people, delegating, having accountability processes, enabling success. And that's what all that scaling is really about. And you just develop your team at the same time.
And you've enabled scale. I want to go down the path of some rapid fire kind of off the cuff questions. Some of these I sent to you in advance, some of them I didn't. So there's no tripwires here, but I'm really curious because this is a great opportunity for me to learn. What's a book that you believe everyone should read?
That's easy for me because I recommend that all the time. Turning the Flywheel by Jim Collins. There's several reasons. It focuses on the flywheel concept, which I think is one of the great great models to capture the essence of a business. And I use that with all my strategy clients of all kinds of organizations. But the great thing about that book is that it also encapsulates a lot of the concepts that Collins developed in several of his books, starting with Good to Great and others. And it's only 39 pages with pictures, so people will actually read it.
I like the pictures part myself personally because that's when they make sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. But I think because it's really distilled down. It's really boiled down to the basics with a lot of the stuff. And so I think it's a great book because people will read that book. It's so small.
And it's actionable, right? Because I think that's one of the things I love about that is because it's actionable. Yeah. And you actually had me thinking about it. It's like, I need to go pull one off my bookshelf and update and revisit it because it is such a powerful. It's such a powerful 39 pages. It's all meaningful.
It is, and the flywheel concept itself, he has a lot of wonderful examples, and there are companies that you might recognize and some that you wouldn't, but of different types of organizations and applications of it, which makes it easy to sort of tie. I gave a copy to the superintendent of schools here in the county where I live, because I do some work with the Education Foundation here, because there's a great school example in the book. And so it's easy for him to sort of connect.
What's the best leadership advice you've ever received?
It's funny because this came from somebody I didn't consider a very good leader in general. But this piece of advice was really good. I was going in as a VP of Ops, replacing one of the owners of a business. And I laid out all of the things, all the challenges in the company that they saw from me, this other owner did. But at the end he said, but don't forget that really the main thing you have to do, the most important thing for you to be successful is to win over the hearts and minds of the people. And I think it's great advice for us as leaders because we can get so tied up in the financials and the markets and the products and the sales and all that stuff that we forget about the true success comes from winning over the hearts and minds of all the people that we work with.
And so much of that are some of the things that we've already talked about, the importance of vision, the importance of culture, the importance of, clear delegation and a commitment to the things that we're going to do and accountability, but winning over the hearts and minds. I love that. Very specifically, I love that you picked up that advice from someone you would not categorize as this sage, Colin Powell-esque leader, who I also had the opportunity to see speak once. And I would put him, probably Colin Powell, is top 3 most influential kind of guys or sage wisdom people. Yeah. And The Leadership Secrets of Colin Powell is one of my most dog-eared books on the understanding of what it takes to be an effective leader.
Yeah, he was also somebody who just had an incredible presence.
Oh, incredible presence.
Yeah.
You felt better about yourself because of his presence in the room.
I agree completely. He lifted it up just by walking in. He didn't have to say anything.
Yes, didn't have to say anything. It's like, okay, to your earliest point, it's like no one ever questioned, you didn't have to be the loudest or sit at the head of the table. The presence is so powerful. And he certainly had that.
He really epitomized calm confidence, didn't he? I mean,
Oh, he totally did. Totally did. One of my favorite Colin Powell quotes is, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's, you're not a leader when the day the soldiers stop bringing you their problems. Like when you're not engaged, listening, you failed as a leader. What's your biggest screw up that ended up turning out great?
I don't know if it was a screw up. It was a difficult thing. In about 1981 or 1982, I bought my first personal computer. And, you say, well, what was the big deal about that? Well, nobody owned personal computers back in that time. It was very early on. It was built by Atari, by the way, who built personal computers back in those days. And I remember having to justify to my wife at the time why I was going to spend that much money on something that I really could not explain what I was going to get out of it or how I was going to use it. And so it was funny. So the first thing that we had, my daughter was very young at the time. She was born in 1980. So what I did to sort of soothe things over was I built a program using BASIC that when you pressed a letter, it would build the letter graphically on the screen and play music, and then use that to teach my daughter her ABCs. And and I said, see, it's just an educational tool. Now, the reason it worked out so well for me was that at Caterpillar, there were very few people who owned PCs because they were expensive back, at that time. So to have one at home was different. And so the people who did were higher ups in the organization, and a lot of them bought them but didn't really know much about them. And so they found out that I had one, and they started coming to me and asking questions, and it made a bunch of connections for me I would never have made otherwise, probably. So that was...
It's a pretty good reason to justify the spend. Here's the way to make it useful.
Yeah, who knew it was going to be a career enhancer? I really didn't at the time. I was just interested in the technology.
What's the best advice you ever received that you ignored at the time?
Probably when I left one company that I was CEO of to go do a turnaround on another company. And I was a Vistage member at the time, and my Vistage group members said, do not do that. That is absolutely crazy. You've got a secure, you've built this great company, and now you're going to go take on one that's probably going to go into the toilet. And I didn't listen to them. Worked out okay? It worked out okay. We turned it around and sold it, but it was, it probably created a lot more stress. A lot more late nights and early mornings and having to tap into my personal savings account and all that kind of stuff to keep it going. But we did it. It was successful. So that was okay. But I did ignore that advice. Probably was good advice, by the way. Probably was good. It's amazing. Sometimes we have to just do it. No matter how many mentors have given us advice, we still have to stub our own toes or take the lessons the hard way. Yeah, I couldn't resist the challenge. I mean, but I was just sure that I could fix it. And it was there wasn't anything wrong with it. There were a lot of good people there, and I felt like I could go in and do it, and with their help, of course. But it probably was better advice to not do it. What's a leadership myth that you would love to debunk? The one I think that I hear an awful lot. There's several that I hear generally from people who are not leaders about leaders. One is that leaders love power and control. Leadership is so far away from being about power and control. And again, Jim Collins in Good Great, when he talked about level 5 leadership, what he found was the people that were most successful as leaders, they didn't take the job because they thought, they wanted to be in charge. They took the job because they were stepping up to something that the organization needed. I don't know about you. I've never even asked what the pay was. Mm-hmm. When I've been moved into leadership positions. That wasn't my question. My question was about what needed to be done, and I wanted to make sure I could help and felt like I could be successful in the role and all those things. I never, ever did it for the money, and I never paid attention to what the money. Matter of fact, I never made any decisions about what jobs I took by which one paid the most. That's a data point of interest, but not a data point of decision. I personally never found out until after the effect in making sure, is the work the right work? Can I create the impact? Can I create value? And I think that most people feel like, leaders, especially anybody who has a CEO title, is probably overpaid and doesn't really do anything. It isn't that, important to the organization. They get all the benefits of another work, and most people don't have any idea what really goes on for a CEO or a business owner, how committed they are to the welfare of the people that work there and their personal responsibility they take for that. It is about the success of the team and the success of the people. And we take great internal pride in being a good employer, in having good, well-paying jobs that are secure for people and their families. That's important, I think, to every good leader.
Could not agree with you more. And for the CEO, for the entrepreneur, for the founder, navigating that alone and navigating, and you and I was first met you through Vistage and had the privilege of being in one of your Vistage groups for 10, 12 years. Having a forum or a council, a place where you did not have to be alone, is such a differentiating factor. And leadership is lonely. Like, there is no question about it. It just doesn't have to be. You have agency to make decisions, to curate a mentor group, to curate an advisory group, to curate relationships, so it doesn't have to be lonely. And I find that most people don't realize, they view it as a lonely place, and where they don't have a choice. But there are lots of great choices out there. Vistage is an example of one.
Yeah, I think the popularity of peer groups today is really significant. Having that peer advisory kind of opportunity, because it is lonely within your own organization. If there are very few people. If you're at the top, there's nobody really you can talk to about a lot of things. And so it's good to have people who are peers to you, whether you're a key executive or a chief executive or an owner, to be able to discuss things within a risk-free environment.
And that's the key, a risk-free environment where you aren't being judged, whatever that the negative consequences or outcomes might be. If you had 3 wishes to give as gifts to others that would benefit them on their journey in service, what would those gifts be? What would those wishes be?
I'm very much an optimist. I'm a pretty positive person. I think we're going through a difficult period in society today with challenges about not serving others, but serving ourselves. And the first thing I would offer up would be grace. I think we've lost a lot of the feeling of giving grace to others, and we've become very judgmental. It's easy to do today. It's easy to expound on our opinions from a distance and with little consequence. And so I try to remind people that we never know what's going on in other people's lives. So before we judge them too harshly, we should either find that out or we should simply extend grace to them. The second thing would be wisdom. We're very smart today. We have access to tons of information, but that doesn't necessarily always come with wisdom. And I think that, we talk about getting the right answer, but sometimes it's more about doing the right thing than it is getting the right answer. And so that's the second thing I guess I'd grant. And the third one would be passion. I think the passion to live our lives and to accomplish the things in life that move us, that meet our personal purpose. I'm big on a lot of times I get calls for people who are maybe considering a change in their life, a job change, or I'll get calls from parents that say, would you talk to my son or daughter who's graduating from college and about to go out into the world? And so I'll talk about personal purpose and the things that we have passion for, and spending a lot of time in our life on those things that really excite us and reward us internally.
I love this list: grace, wisdom, and passion. And as you were talking, wisdom really resonates, especially right now. To your point, we have a lot of information, not a lot of wisdom. And I'm thinking about AI, and I'm thinking about all the wonderful AI tools, but it's the wisdom to know how to ask the right questions, to ignore the AI prompt or answer, to know how these things apply. It's going to be a really interesting season, and that's probably an episode all by itself, is talking about the impact of AI on leadership and how it can be incredibly useful and a force multiplier, and how it can actually become a negative crutch if you're not applying wisdom. So I'll pause here and get a reaction, but then maybe that's going to be an invitation back to continue that conversation, because I'd really love to hear your thoughts on some of these things, as I know you stay very, very current with what's going on.
Well, it has a lot of things up in the air. I mentioned earlier, I sit on the executive board for the Education Foundation of Caldwell County, where I live. And as you know, we're starting to have conversations about how do we support students and educators, which is our mission, going into the future, because it's going to be a very different place. We're not sure what education is going to look like. And that's going to be true in a lot of other places. What will continuing education look like for students, and what will their jobs look like when they come out? And so, we're really having to challenge ourselves. And I think that's going to be true across society.
Could not agree with you more. So I'm going to just create an open invitation, and let's have a deeper conversation on that point in the future if you're willing and able. So, Terry, this is remarkable. I am so deeply appreciative, continue to be appreciative of the wisdom that you've given me over, the 15 plus years that we've known each other, and now have invested into our audience here. And I'm just eternally grateful and thankful to have a mentor like you in my life.
Listen, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me to come over and talk a little bit. I'm happy to do that. Happy to come back and talk about something else anytime you want to.
Cool. Terry, thank you so much. If today's episode gave you something to think about, something to apply, then there's more where that came from. Head over to arcusgroup.com and sign up for our newsletter. It's where we share tools, insights, and our leadership frameworks to help you lead with more clarity, more alignment, and more impact. No fluff, just what helps you lead better. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time on Leadership Unlocked.